Hey everyone, this is Andrew from Private Investigator Advice, and this is going to be episode 77. This is going to be why some private investigators are more expensive than others. This episode is brought to you by Private Investigator Advice. I have created a private investigator surveillance template for you. It comes with the template. It comes with an example report for you to kind of look at and get an idea of what should be in a surveillance report. And then I do a video walkthrough for you just to even more explain to you what's inside of that report and where everything should go. And this is going to be good for investigators just starting their business. Maybe they've never sold surveillance services, and so they really don't know what to have in their surveillance template. Maybe this is for existing private investigators. Maybe they want to see what else is out there, what else could be added to their existing reports. And obviously, for the new investigator who maybe wants to get prepared for that new job, kind of get an idea of what these reports are going to look like, be kind of a little bit prepared for it when they do get that investigator job. So, again, what I'm going to do for the people who are watching the podcast video, I'm going to go ahead and put a link to the surveillance template in the bottom of the notes. I'll put a link in the podcast notes. And always, you can find these surveillance templates at privateinvestigatoradvicehq.com or piadvice.net, whatever's easier for you. Okay, so let's get on into the podcast here. So this podcast is based off of an article I wrote a long time ago. And I wrote it for the consumer in mind, right? Like I really was, I was kind of thinking of the private investigator, but I was more thinking of this needs to be explained to the consumer, the person who's purchasing investigative services. And what really sparked it even more was at that time, I had read an article from another investigator, and their article was basically, titled the same, "Why are private investigators so expensive?" But in the content of that article, they didn't really explain. In fact, they gave reasons, or kind of like the lifestyle of a private investigator, like, we were away from home a lot, and our life is inconsistent. We never know when we're going to be home or how long we're going to be working and things like that. But it wasn't really a reason as to some of the reasons behind the pricing for investigative services. And so, I messaged the guy. I told him I just didn't agree with how he was putting it. Anyways, and so that kind of sparked this article. So some people, some investigators will say, or even discussions of, hey, if you hire a cheap or less expensive private investigator, you're not necessarily getting good quality, and if you pay for more and more expensive investigator, if you pay more for their services for these specific investigators, you're going to get investigators that know what they're doing. You're going to get faster turnaround time, and we're going to be more efficient. Things like that. That's the way that private investigators who may charge more than other people. That's kind of how they sell that price. Now, sometimes that may be true, but sometimes it might not be true. Maybe there's other reasons why their prices are a little more expensive than somebody else's. So, I'll probably mention this again. Just because someone charges more does not necessarily mean they're better. So let's get into, why some private investigators are more expensive than others. Okay. I'll start off by saying, many investigators are willing to undercut their competition for services. And this happens a lot in the surveillance side of things. And you might wonder, how can they charge less than the other guy? Why is this investigator willing to only bill me $40 or $50 an hour, and this one is demanding $75 an hour for surveillance? Is there a reason behind it? And so we're going to get into some of those reasons. So one of the reasons why an investigator can charge less is they have less overhead. There's a lot of one-woman, one-man operations as private investigators. it's kind of a solo gig a lot of times before if you know or if an investigator decides to expand their business and make it bigger and hire employees and all that kind of good stuff. But there's probably more single person companies than there are, more than one single, 2 or 3 person companies and bigger. So investigators have less overhead. They bill, they basically bill according to that. When there's other companies that have more overhead, their overhead might be, additional investigators that we just spoke about, secretaries, bookkeepers, the business space, and then all can contribute to the cost of what they're charging their clients. So, and so when they have more overhead, these different things they have to pay for every month, that bloats their hourly rate. They've got to pay for these things every month, so that inflates the rate that they charge. Number 2, these investigators that are charging less than maybe somebody else, they might have a lower standard of living, right? They live modestly. They may, I can't speak for every investigator, but maybe, they have a smaller home, they drive, regular cars. They're not driving anything fancy. They don't have boats and whatever, second homes and things that they have to pay for. They just live a modest lifestyle. So they don't have to charge a great deal. Maybe they're more worried about just getting the work in general to pay their bills than to try to make it rich on every case. Number 3, different types of investigations have different costs. They have different expected costs. So here's an example. If I do a surveillance, let's just say in my hometown, right? Someone hires me, they say, hey, I want you to do a surveillance in your hometown. My costs are not going to be as much, right? So I have a smaller amount of costs to drive to the case. It's in my town, right? Maybe 10, 15 minutes away. Then I do the surveillance, and then I don't have to take a long time to get home, right? It's not a great deal of travel to get there. But if you ask me to do the same exact surveillance or the same type of surveillance, but then you need me to do that in Spokane, my price is going to go up a little bit more because I've got to travel 5 hours there, right? And then I've got to pay for hotel rooms and any additional expenses that might incur. Now I've got to pay for more food, right? So my prices might come up. I have to absorb that somehow. And then I've got to, drive back, and that's another 5 hours. It's time that I won't be working. So I'm probably going to charge for that. And so that's going to add, a different cost to the same job, right? It's still surveillance, but now it's somewhere else further away. It's going to cost a little bit more if you want me to do it. What's the way around that for a customer? Well, you just try to find a good investigator in that town, and hopefully the prices won't be more, right? Okay, so number 4, the private investigators that are charging less aren't overcharging to make their mortgage payment. They're not trying to make it rich on every single assignment. In fact, a lot of these investigators are more worried about volume than they are, the big, landfall, whatever, client where they're going to, bill thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. No, they're going to say, okay, here's my rate. I'm going to get the job, hopefully, because I've basically undercut a lot of people in my area. They're charging more than me. I'm going to charge less. I'm going to provide the same product. And hopefully, as a result, maybe I can get more work and pay my bills, right? So they're not trying to make an entire house payment or, future house payments on one case. They're more worried about getting more cases from their clients over a longer period of time. Not like just a one-hit wonder kind of thing. So basically, yeah, like I said, volume. Some people are more concerned about volume. So what are some of the costs? And I kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the regular costs and fixed costs that contribute to the rate of a private investigator? So, this is if you're a private investigator listening to this, you're probably like, yep, yeah, that's right. If you're a consumer of private investigators, you want to purchase one or purchase their services. These are the types of things that may contribute to the rate that they charge. Okay, so one of the things is office space. If an investigator has an office, then that is going to be a fixed rate or a fixed cost for them every month. And along with that goes with their utilities and lights, water, whatever that goes along with it, garbage. That's going to be there every month, and so they've got to cover that every month, and that's maybe embedded into their rate and how much more they charge. That might contribute to maybe charging $15 or $20 more than somebody else who doesn't have that. Another one is staff, right? If a company is a little bit larger, they have to pay for that staff. They have to pay for, this is usually part of the companies. If there's somebody the salesperson, they have to pay for the video, compiler, the editor, maybe the editor of the reports. Maybe they have a case manager they're paying for managing the office and the assignments out in the field. When it comes to investigations, usually it's anybody who's not actually doing the investigative work is considered like overhead. They're contributing to all of this, the business, but without the investigator doing the actual work itself, they're the ones who are bringing the money. So they're not making any money technically for the company, but they're helping provide the product or get the product. Okay, so the third one is some of the stuff that contributes to the rate is a subscription. We have to subscribe to databases that help us locate people and find out information about people. It kind of helps us do it much faster and makes us more efficient. And so anyways, for me, I pay like $25 a month for just the subscription alone, not for the service, not to use the service, just to have the service available to me. It's $25 a month. Some are more than that. That's it's not a huge cost, but it could be a contributing cost to some people. Now, I just talked about it. Number 4 would be accessing that information. Different types of information cost different amounts for the use of these databases that are like subscription based. So that could contribute to what it's going to cost a consumer of a private investigator services. It might cost them a little more if they have to use more of these, and maybe the private investigator charges for that. That will cost more money. Okay, so another thing that contributes to the rate that you are paying a private investigator is obviously the assignment itself. So if the investigation company is paying somebody, they might be paying that investigator, I'm going to say $25, $30 an hour, and then they're going to charge on top of that. They're going to charge a little bit more. So I'm sorry, they're paying their investigator $25, $30 an hour. They might be charging you $50, $55 an hour to cover different costs associated, or just to pad the billing to pay for those resources we talked about earlier. Again, they have to pay that person. If it's one person, if it's me, I'm a solo person company. I'm charging you for my time, what I think it's worth. So surveillance is a very basic, easy example. If I go to the assignment, depending on what I'm charging you for, did I charge you to, for travel to and from? Did I charge you for mileage? But really, it's the time on site that I'm referring to here. When I get there, when I start the assignment, when I end the assignment, that's the billable time for me. So that could contribute to what you're paying. Number 6 is expenses. Some investigators might absorb some of their expenses, the small ones, into the billable rate, or it might be tacked onto the bill afterwards. Not every investigator is the same on this. Sometimes I like to make things easier for myself. If I know that any extra expenses aren't going to be huge, I'm just like, whatever, I'm just going to absorb it. I'm not even going to mention it. Or I might mention it and just show it, this is free. I'm not charging for this, to make goodwill with my client. So that's something extra that incorporates into a billing, an investigator's rate. Travel, number 7. If you travel a great deal, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but if you have to travel to an assignment, it could, the investigator could tack that onto the rate itself. So Maybe I mean, let's just throw it out here. Maybe in my area, I charge $55 an hour to work surveillance in this vicinity. But if you ask me to do surveillance out, an hour outside of my area, I'm going to charge you $75 an hour. And that might compensate for the travel, the gas, the hotel, tolls, food, anything I have to, absorb during that time. That might be how I do it. I might incorporate it just into the billable rate. Everybody does it a little bit differently. I'm just trying to give, consumers an idea of where this is all coming from. And then number 8, another reason why a private investigator might bill more than another is because of expertise. Doctors, lawyers, they all have some sort of expertise, something they're really good at, and that they focus on, right? Like, a hand doctor, a foot doctor. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. I'm sure there's really great medical terms for this. A throat doctor, ear, nose, and throat doctor. They all specialize in these things, and therefore they're very knowledgeable and good at these things. Lawyers, I'm sure there's just general practicing lawyers, but most lawyers specialize in something, right? And so I'll call a lawyer and he'll be like, no, I'm not really specialized in that. Here, why don't you call Bill over such and such? He only does that type of law. And so I'll call Bill, So anyways, that might play into play a factor into the billable rate. If there's not a lot of people doing what that investigator is selling, like maybe it's something specific that there's just not a lot of qualified or certified investigators to do, then they can pick up the rates. They could charge a lot more than the average investigator, generally speaking. So if it's just the run of the mill, hey, I need you to go follow my wife around town, it would be difficult for someone to justify. It doesn't take any certifications to follow someone around on surveillance, but it might, for some other specific, like computer forensics or something like that, that's a little more specialized field, and you could probably pay a little more. And it takes a lot of time to do that stuff. So that's just one example I could think of off the top of my head here. Anyways, with that expertise, I would say, going back to the more someone specializes in something, if they're really good at something and someone's willing to pay them for being really good at something, like someone who does background checks every day, they're going to be very efficient in what they do. They're going to know where all the information is that they need to look, for that background check, and they could produce that product much faster than maybe somebody who doesn't do background checks all the time. Now this person might know how to do them, but they may not be as efficient, and therefore it might cost more time and energy to do that assignment versus somebody who can just pop it out and they get all the same information as the other guy who takes a little bit longer. So that's why someone might pay more or less. So for consumers, this is for you, for private investigators. This is one of the things that these things here I hear a lot, and I don't agree with them a lot of the times. So. And someone might get upset about this. They might say, no, that's not true. This isn't a blanket statement and it's always going to be true. But these are some of the things that do happen in the investigation world. And I'm sure other companies and different industries as well. But I want to go over helpful tips for consumers not to get tricked into overpaying for their services. So one of the things that one investigator might say is you could hire someone that charges less, but you won't get the same result in service. Now, that might apply to specific types of investigations. I admit to that. When I think of that kind of a statement, though, I relate it to what I do. And if someone says that about surveillance, I would disagree highly. If you're going to charge $100 an hour for surveillance, and I'm going to charge 60, and you're going to say that, and you're going to use the same equipment that I'm going to use and do the same types of things I'm going to do, now you're just making things up. You don't know for sure that you're going to get the same results as me. I'm going to be trying to get the job. You might be trying to get rich off of that surveillance. I'm just trying to pay my bills, so I'm charging my rate, what I'm worth. And so, does it mean that you're better because you charge $100 an hour? No, not at all. But you're really ripping off somebody. In my, I mean, if unless they're willing to pay that, um, yeah, there's no guarantee that you're going to get results on something like that. And to charge more, then you're taking that chance as a private investigator that you might not get the job. So am I lesser of an investigator because I charge $55, $60 an hour? No, not at all. In fact, the client's saving a lot more money, and they could probably do more surveillance time because I'm not charging them that much. And again, I get the job, and I just took it from the guy who's trying to charge more than that. So keep that in mind as a consumer. Private investigators, keep that in mind when you're picking your rate. It's just be conscious of it. Be conscious of the people, the investigators in your area and what they're charging, because who knows? Maybe that might be a selling point for you as an investigator. Hey, that guy wants to charge you $80 an hour, and I'm going to charge you 50. Just think how much more time you're going to get when you pay a retainer of $1,500. You might get an whole extra day of surveillance versus, based off of what they're paying. Not as much. So keep that in mind. The second one is, I've been in business for 30 years and that's why you should hire me. Something to that effect. I've been doing this for so long and that's why you should pick me. I wrote an article about this a long time ago. I might have even done a podcast. I can't remember now, but experience isn't always what you think it is. 30 years being licensed as a private investigator doesn't mean anything if you're not practicing as a private investigator. But no one's going to tell you that. No one's going to say, "Oh no, I only work, 1 or 2 assignments a year," or something like that. They're not going to tell you that, right? They're just going to tell you, "No, I've been a licensed investigator for, 30 years." A lot of times, people who aren't practicing, every day aren't going to be as sharp as the people doing something every day. Someone who does surveillance 2 times a year is not going to be as good as someone who does it every single day and practices it and knows the craft, right? That other person isn't going to be as efficient, isn't going to be as sharp. There's going to be a lot of different things going on with that investigator who does it 2 times, 3 times a year. So that's just kind of a little example. So anyways, you want to ask, you want to ask questions as a consumer, how often do they work files? Maybe I'm just giving you some ideas here, because that might make the difference in your choice. So anyways, number 3, a company might say, we charge this much because we have the latest technology. And I think that's something that's commonly said on every private investigator website. We've got all the technology you need. That may be true in specific instances where a service is being provided that maybe another investigator isn't providing. But I'll just use it we'll just stay in the whole terms of surveillance. If you're doing a regular surveillance like me, there's probably no technology you have that you can use to do that surveillance that I'm not using. So that doesn't necessarily justify hiring that person or paying a higher rate. Just keep that in mind as a consumer. And if they ever do say we have the latest technology, as a consumer, you need to ask them, what is that latest technology that you're using? And you write it down. And then when you call the next investigator and you're asking them questions, ask them, hey, do you have this stuff? Do you use this stuff? Is this the latest technology? And if you find that your other investigator is exaggerating, well, then, maybe you should be going with them. Okay. Number 4, let me just preface this by saying I have great respect for law enforcement. I don't say this in any disrespectful manner. If you listen to my podcast number 76, I talk about my veteran friends who, many of which are police officers and actually have family members that are police officers. So I don't say this in a way to disrespect that occupation. That's not my purpose of this. But for a consumer, you need to understand that just because someone's a police officer, they might say, I'm a former police officer. This is why I'm completely qualified to do this assignment. In some cases, that might be true. But more times than not, it's not going to be true because of just maybe the nature of the work. Again, I'll use surveillance as an example. It doesn't take a police officer to be good at surveillance. In fact, a lot of police officers don't do surveillance. And so that's not something that necessarily they can leverage to get your business. There's a lot of I've trained former police officers to do surveillance just because they were no longer police officers and they were in the insurance investigation industry, and I just to make teach them how to do it, make sure they knew, send them on their way. And by the way, like majority of all the police officers I've ever trained to do surveillance, all great guys, all picked it up really well, all did it very well, once they kind of figured it out. So anyways, I guess the main thing I'm trying to say here is just because someone has law enforcement experience does not make them necessarily more qualified to do the assignment that you're asking them to do or to charge more or anything like that. So anyways, okay, so here's my final thoughts. I've been doing this a little while. Gosh, probably 70% of my career was over the past 13, 14 years was just surveillance. Probably 30, I don't know, now I'm really messing with percentages here, 30, 40%. I did a lot of field investigations, a lot of interviews. I think that was actually the most funnest stuff that I've done over the years. I am not I'm not the type of guy who's just going to go ahead and defend any private investigator out there. If I see someone who's not being good to customers or trying to trick them, or take advantage of something, I'm not going to defend something like that, right? Like I'm not I don't have a bias towards private investigators. I'm just I'm more concerned about the investigator taking care of their customer, right? That's more what I'm concerned about. And I hope through all these podcasts, if you're the private investigator listening, that, our goal as investigators is to be servants to them, right? Like to service them. We want to provide a product to them because they're hiring us to do something. That's our goal. Our goal isn't just kind of swindle them and lead them on or take advantage of them. Because a lot of times they're spending a lot of money for our services, right? Our expertise or services. So we want to take care of them, whether we're making a lot of money or we're not. And so I just hope, I hope you just kind of take some of this information that I've said and just kind of consider it and just kind of, chew on it for a little bit when, you are selling your services to customers. And I'm not saying don't be good sales. I'm not saying hey, don't use your superpowers, right? I'm not saying don't mention you're not a police officer because, that might make someone feel more comfortable hiring you. I've talked about that in the past about using, accolades and things like that. Cause obviously you want to be good salesmen. You don't want to lose a job because you didn't sell better than the other guy and you're better than that guy. So I'm not saying that, but just take care of your customer. And for customers, it is your job to do your due diligence. You need to, and I hope this helps a little bit when you're picking out a private investigator, but you got to do your due diligence in picking the right one for yourself. And hopefully, you do. And that's really why I put this together, and hopefully that helped. And before we close, and this is the worst time to do an ad, but this ending of the podcast was brought to you by Audible. Audible gives you a free digital downloaded book to listen to, and they've got a bajillion books. And all you have to do is sign up for the free trial. It's a 30-day free trial. You can download a book. You get to listen to it. They've got they got everything, everything you can imagine. They pretty much got on Audible for you to listen to any book, right? And it's probably one of the best things you can do when you're traveling a lot. Maybe you're on vacation or you're traveling to your destination or you're traveling to work every morning. Dude, you could knock out a book without even having to, waste time. I would call it waste time, but when you're just sitting there doing nothing, if you're going to be driving, listen to something, listen to some knowledge, listen to some stories, whatever's going to work for you. So again, you can get that free book going to www.audibletrial.com/PIA. I am an affiliate. I will receive a commission should you sign up for that free book. And if you don't like it, make sure you cancel before the 30 days. If not, if you do keep with it, let me know how you like it. Let me know what books you're reading, what you're into. And that way I can share with others and be like, hey, Bobby was listening to, Harry Potter over here. He was really digging it. And he said it's better than the movie or whatever, right? So, all right, that's it. Again, audibletrial.com/PIA. Get your free book. We thank Audible for letting me do this and share that with you. And that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I hope you got something from it. And I'll put the link to the surveillance template in the bottom of the video. I'll put it in the podcast notes, and I'll probably even link to it in the original article. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you guys on the next one.